Welcome, everyone. Episode 65 of Christian Geeks Rockcast. And we are actually in a legit studio for the first time ever because we have Mr. Ronny Cates with us. So welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And for those of you who may be new to this world, Ronny Cates is the former bass player for a little band called Petra. And so we are just privileged to be able to meet with him today in his working environment. We just invaded his workspace, so we appreciate you letting us in.
Man,
we're going to make a good mess before we go, right? Like you're a real Christian. You'll clean it up after us.
Yes, you get a guitar when you leave.
Really?
Oh, no way. Do not say that.
Yeah, I was just joking.
Good.
I figured. No, it's interesting because we obviously a couple of years ago probably I realized Ronnie actually works at the same church I go to, but not at the same campus that I go to. So mutual friend Lee Baker is on staff here who has a podcast, MyFi podcast. So everybody tune into that. But I just got up to Lee one day. I'm like, please just introduce me to Ronnie. Because even though we're around, we rarely, I don't usually see you. So it's great.
Yes. Yeah. Probably the times when you're there, I am not there. If you're at that campus.
Oh yeah. For sure. Yeah. And then when I'm here, I'm usually here with a bunch, probably about 1,000 teenagers, and you probably don't want to be anywhere near here. So.
Yeah. Oh man!
Well, thank you so much for getting to this.
Absolutely.
This is a real pleasure for us, and it's
happy to be here.
And as most people know, and as we've talked to you about, it's like our podcast mostly focuses on that sort of early mid '80s to mid '90s ish, which is right about the time that you were in the biggest Christian band in the world. So
right.
It's
and that's not an exaggeration. I mean,
no,
literally. If you guys don't know, Ronnie was the bass player for a time when, and we'll get into some of this, when Petra was everywhere, and they had a string of albums that I'm not going to say are unparalleled in Christian music, but like it's hard to beat that string of albums. And obviously it was because Ronnie was the bass player.
That was one of my questions is what made you their key to success? I'm just kidding.
There would be no truth to that statement. Yeah.
So Ronnie, let's just get started with how did you get started in music? How did you begin in music, learning and maybe and then Christian music as a part of that?
Okay. I grew up in Shreveport, Louisiana, which is just literally next door to where Lee Baker grew up, the sister town.
Yeah.
We're slightly different ages, but I grew up there. I had a desire. Music was always a big thing for me. I can remember enjoying music just really obnoxiously early in life. And it made sense to me. I understood the parts and pieces.
Good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh. I could probably say the same.
Yeah, you get it.
My mother's Beatles albums and those sort of things when I was 6 and 7, but yeah.
Special.
Yeah.
I eventually took acoustic guitar lessons in 4th and 5th grade and then just kind of went off on my own and learned past that. That eventually led to, I was part of a great church growing up. By the time I got to high school, I was playing electric guitar in cover bands and stuff. And then at church, we had a youth choir, a large youth choir with a band. And so I would play guitar. And then one year they needed a bass player. And so, I thought, well, okay, I'll play bass this year. And I played bass and it just stuck with me. I still play guitar, but it's not my primary instrument anymore. And around that time, some local friends and I from the church, we started playing just predominantly Christian music that we were aware of from going to Christian record stores and buying the Christian, LPs. Or CDs or cassettes. Right. And we just naturally fell into that. We were all musicians that enjoyed all kinds of music, but we thought, let's have something that has a purpose to it that's far greater than ourselves. And we did that for years, as long as I can remember. And then there was a point when I knew that God wanted me to do something in music and in ministry. And of course, being in Shreveport, Louisiana, and in that time frame, there were no seminaries or Bible schools that would teach you how to marry those two ideas and to be available. That didn't exist then. A lot of places still didn't even like Christian music, much less Christian rock music. So through a set of God-ordained circumstances, I ended up living in Nashville. A friend of mine had referred me to. Did you want to go into this? I just jumped off the cliff and kept talking.
Go for it.
Okay,
go for it.
So I had been playing. I can remember. I'll tell a few stories. I don't know that I've ever told anybody publicly. With our college group from the church in Louisiana, a bunch of us went to go see Amy Grant in Dallas, Texas. That was about a 4-hour drive at the Dallas Convention Center. Yep. And we were all sitting in there, and there was a moment in that night when there was something in me that said, that's what you're supposed to do. It was very strange, very scary in a healthy sense of awe and respect. And how does that happen? Well, I just filed that memory in a file cabinet in my brain and thought, okay, well, you're going to have to do something with this, God. I don't know what this means. And so about a year later, I'd worked at a music store in Louisiana while going to college, and the owner of the music store referred me. He knew of my talent on guitar and different things, and I like to work on guitar. So there was a country music artist from Nashville that was the entertainer of the year in country music that year, and he was looking for another guitar technician. So strange set of circumstances. My friend knew some friends, so they hooked us up. I ended up working for Ricky Skaggs for about a year, who was huge at that moment. He was the entertainer of the year, so it's a big deal. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so I was taking care of some of the guitars, not Ricky's, but banjos, acoustic guitars, all this other stuff. Great working experience. Ricky's a strong Christian. It's a great environment. Yes.
Hey, quick interjection.
Yes.
I'm sure you have, but have you heard? Didn't he do that album Mosaic a few years ago?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. If you've never heard that album, highly recommend it. It's one of the most beautiful albums, because I think one of the guys from Whiteheart wrote a lot of the songs.
Interesting.
Wow.
Kennedy, maybe
Gordon Kennedy.
I think Gordon Kennedy wrote all the songs. Sure. Anyway, I'm sorry.
I believe that.
But so you were with Ricky Skaggs?
Yeah, as a guitar tech, did that for about a year until, again, that strange voice. Mm-hmm. I'm laying it. Voice. It's a strange voice. I'm in the bunk on the bus, bunks in the bed, my bed on the bus. And okay, Ronnie, it's time to go. Been here a year, kind of digging it. So I left, a month or so later, and worked odd jobs and did whatever I could. I'm in Nashville. God, what do you want to do with me? I'm here. Just do what you want to do. I lived in an apartment complex and made friends with other guys my age. Well, some of those guys happened to be people that were either in Whiteheart or working for Whiteheart. There were a number of us. We're all in our early 20s, living in Nashville. Just, God, we're here. Just if you want to use us. So I auditioned for some jobs, tried to get anything, and couldn't get anything. And then out of the blue one day, I'm playing racquetball with a friend of mine, Scott Davis, who worked for Whiteheart. He said, Ronnie, Petra's looking for a bass player. And I thought, that would never happen. Yes. So he called John Schlitt and said, hey, you might want to audition this guy. It may work out. So a week later, I auditioned, and long story short, I got it. So it was just a story. It's a complete God story. There was literally nothing that I did. I practiced, I played, all of that.
Yeah, you did the only thing you could do, which was stay prepared and say yes.
That's
it. That's all. That's it. So a couple questions going back. What were some of your, as you started to learn music and getting into Christian bands, whether Christian or non-Christian, what were some bands and influences that you had through that time? Because you talked about being a part of like country music, but then, you get into Petra, which was a lot more rock. So
in their metal era.
Right? Yes. Well, growing up, my affinities in music were very eclectic. So when I was growing up, Boston had done their first album, the first Van Halen album. There were Beach Boys records that were still masterpieces.
Yes, there were Pet Sounds.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Then there would be 38 Special and there would be this, that, and the other. You name it. It was a great time for rock music in those days. Foreigner, goodness gracious, Journey. So anyway, as far as some of the Christian stuff I was listening to later, my friends and I, we all really liked a guy named Russ Taff.
Oh, yeah.
Who used to sing for a group called the Imperials. So his voice still to me just wrecks me when I hear it. It does something emotionally to me. Between them, and I was always a Whiteheart fan, DeGarmo and Key, you name it. It was all there. I mean, that was me.
So I'm in a band. I usually play bass, and
Amen.
so I
yes.
But I started on the guitar as well.
Oh, come
How did
on!
I get in this room with so many bass?
And so my question is
right
for you. So my experience was, I'm playing the guitar, and I wasn't a great guitar player. And my brother and other people around me were like playing Eddie Van Halen solos, and I'm like, gee, no. But no bands had a bass player. Like none of the bands had a bass player. So for me switching to bass, I could play with anybody I wanted, basically. So was that, and I learned to really love the space of the bass. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but the where the bass is, I learned to really enjoy that sort of that foundational piece as a different part of writing and stuff like that. So I don't know how similar that was for you. How did you learn to love the bass particularly?
Wow. Well, some of the early bands I was playing with, there would be two of us as guitar players. A real good friend of mine was a guitar player, and I was a guitar player. Then I started playing bass in this band instead of guitar, and something clicked. This bass, there's something that just clicked. And I was like, wow, this is a lot of fun. Yeah. This is really fun. And it just stuck. Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah, that's... My notes are gone, so I...
now you're winging it.
And I'm going to wing it, which is not really that hard for me. But so when you joined Petra,
right?
It was, I guess, between This Means War and On Fire.
That's correct.
And so they were, my first concert was Petra in like 85, 86. I think it was 85.
Yeah.
That was with Greg.
It was with Greg.
That was Greg.
And then, so it's like, I was from ground zero, just big Petra fan. I had Petra posters on my wall, the whole thing. And so when you joined, a new era had begun because John had joined the band and they had gone from more of a, I don't even know, like just 80s pop to kind of a little bit heavier hard rock, arena rock, that sort of thing.
Sure.
But so you came from, I guess we'll call it humble beginnings, and then suddenly you're in this massive band and with still more to grow, because I think Beyond Belief was probably the peak of sales and popularity and that sort of thing. What was it like going from living in that apartment to suddenly touring the world and, legitimately in the biggest Christian band in the world? Because that to me is always fascinating to me, like what that's like.
One of the things that helped tremendously is that I'd been on the road as a guitar tech for a guy who was incredibly popular. And so it was modeled to me.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. How do you carry yourself? What is life like? Just the day-to-day routine. What is that even? You don't know unless you've done it, Right. So God had really blessed me and allowed me to be a part of something where I could see that. So going from delivering pizzas to playing for Petra is a little bit of a jump, most definitely. I can remember a couple of the first things we did was to shoot a photo because Thomas Nelson Book Publishers was putting out a new student Bible, and Petra was part of the brand package for that. So that was a strange one. Like, wait, Thomas Nelson, the huge book publisher.
Oh, sure.
And I'm going to be on a picture for a Bible. You know,
Was that the Transformers Bible by chance?
Man, good gracious.
I actually may still have it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Hey, were there pictures of Optimus Prime
No,
and
it
Bumblebee?
was, no, I just, for some reason, when you said that, it just clicked
Yeah,
in my mind. I'm like,
that was
I had
it.
that Bible. So
That was it. So what was it like? It was very interesting and very comfortable. That's how you know that God was a part of it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It was very comfortable.
Yeah.
And see, the guys had been around the block by this point. So there were no egos. You know, people got along. We all worked together. We were a team. You know, our crew worked as a team. I mean, it was a well-oiled machine by that point. And so it very quickly became just normal life. And I didn't see it as really different than anything else. And people would say, well, that's odd. You're playing in front of all these people. How can that be normal? I have no idea. But it was it was something I don't take for granted. And I always remembered that it wasn't me who got me there, because it was so obvious. But it was a great experience. And early on in that time period, you correctly stated, that it had come from This Means War. On Fire came out, 6 months later or so. And it was just normal life at that point. I have no idea how to explain it. But for believers who might feel called into doing different things that God has set before you, when you're doing that, it feels very normal. When you're not doing that, it feels very abnormal. Mm-hmm. So,
well, and I think coming at it with that level of humility and understanding that God puts you in that place is really the only way to be. But I know for a fact that that's not how everybody sees it, because because it would be difficult not to get all in yourself. They're going like, they love me.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Well, how much do you think, Bob Hartman, especially, but just like you said, the band that had been around the block, that they had already kind of developed this culture? Because I got the sense, even when I was a teen from the outside, that, Petra worked a little harder to kind of, partner with churches, partner with local police, departments. And I got that sense, at least. I don't know how true it was or real it was, but they seemed like they went out of their way not to come in as a, we're just here, screw everybody else. We're a rock band, with an attitude, like they were really trying to come in and be part of the community locally. And so did they develop any sort of like habits and things along, like Bible studies, prayer times? Like, did they develop things? Because I think sometimes, and we talked about this on the podcast, that some of the stories I hear from Christian bands is, I think you got to be really careful when you pull people away from fellowship, from weekly community fellowship where people, they don't care whether you're in a rock band, they're going through their stuff anyway, but I think there's some real life within that. And so, I don't know, I wanted to ask, I seem like they had a good handle on some of that from the outside. Like, can you speak to any of that Petra did?
Are you referring to things that we would do in the community?
Well, yeah, either that, but
personally.
I think even more just personally, just as the five of you, or with the crew, or like how did you kind of keep hold one another accountable and like do all that sort of stuff?
Great question. Okay, so in that period of time, we were traveling a lot on the weekends. Okay, so a good bit of the year, we might be gone, let's say Wednesday through Monday. Then you go back home for a few days, sometimes a little longer. And then sometimes you would have a couple of weeks off, and sometimes you're back on the road. So everybody had their local fellowships, their local churches that they went to and were involved in. Mm-hmm. That was just normal. And it was also at a time period when people my own age group at a lot of these churches were musicians that played in bands, and that was the norm. Does that make no? It was the norm. It was not uncommon, and we're
especially in Nashville.
Absolutely, and at that point in time, so the responsibility, very truly, as all of us as believers, is we have a responsibility to continue to be moving toward Christ-likeness, part of sanctification. That doesn't change because you're in a Christian rock band. It means you still have a personal resolve for sanctification. There were not a whole lot of overt times where we would say, okay, we're going to do a Bible study today on 1 Colossians. It makes sense. Mm-hmm. And then tomorrow we're going to do the second chapter of Colossians. Or it would be, that was extremely rare. However, it was very apparent to us in those moments and in those times that God was doing something. And it was not lost on us, because we all had a great handle on the fact that God had changed us. He had saved us. He had literally, all of us had similar stories of God had moved upon each member to be in Nashville and arranged all of these pieces of the puzzle, because it'd be no logical way that any human could do it. And so we saw that. And then also during this time, the number of people that were getting saved.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of concerts was like, this is undeniable. Mm-hmm. This is, you better treat it carefully and respect it. And so we all took that stance very proactively. Now, with one another, we didn't take ourselves serious. We picked on John Schlitt a lot. That's just what
I've
we
heard
do.
that from
all of that. That's very normal. And when we see each other, even now, I haven't seen him in a few years, but the next time we see each other, it will pick up exactly where we left off. Same conversations, same joking, everything. So it was, to answer your question, 5 guys who knew that God had saved them, had done a miraculous work in their life, had moved them, all of us, to different parts, from parts of the country into being in Petra. And God was doing a great work with that had nothing to do with us other than our obedience and putting our yes on the table. That kind of makes sense?
Well,
so it was,
an
amazing. And dude, I can remember, this is after On Fire, about the time maybe of Petra Praise. We were doing a lot of interesting tours with a guy named Josh McDowell. Mm-hmm. Book writer.
I was at a couple of those shows.
Okay.
He's come to my office and spoke, actually.
Oh, great. Well, we did a lot together, a lot. And it was very atypical. You have a Christian rock band and a Christian apologist who's going to talk about abstinence and all of that. Dude, there were moments in those tours where there was no logical reason why that many people should be showing up. What I mean by this is that in big cities, the audience would be really large. It's a large city. A lot of people would go. And we would be in a B market or a C market, which is a smaller city, very much middle America. And we would have these huge amounts of people showing up and a lot of people getting saved. And it was, you'd have to completely isolate yourself from everything to lose sight of the fact that God was doing something. Mm-hmm. It was amazing.
What was your experience like with McDowell? I mean, I'm not looking for gossip. I'm not looking for gossip or anything, but what was that like?
He's great. He's high energy. He's really funny. Adores his family, and all of his kids were really young, and he would bring them out on the road sometimes, and his family. I just adored being around him. Huge. Yeah, huge influence on my life from a man living out his calling. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
And it was just great.
I mean, a lot of people may not know. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably do, but he was huge.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my
in the
God.
80s. I mean, like he spoke at a lot of these rock conferences.
Oh, my
I mean, Christian rock shows, festivals and stuff like that. So and his book was phenomenal. His book really was legitimately phenomenal.
Is that the Evidence That Demands a Verdict?
I think
yeah,
so, right?
Evidence That Demands a Verdict.
Anyway, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, just a delightful guy. Yeah. And we did so many, probably a good part of 2 years we did everything together.
So did you feel like I mean, this is a weird question probably, but did you feel like I'm a traveling evangelist or I'm a rock band bass player, or was it some kind of weird amalgamation of the two?
It was a weird amalgamation of the two. Very much so. God calls us, sets us apart. We're given the Great Commission. We have been commissioned to do for the rest of our lives, right? We've given ourselves to this, go into the world, make disciples, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. I mean, that is there. That's not going to change. Right. And I was in a really large Christian rock band. So a weird amalgamation of the two, for sure. Yeah.
That's gotta be, I mean, it's like getting yourself out of the way. I mean, because you got to get yourself out of the way. That's got to be first and foremost.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to get into a couple of the albums. So
sure.
You started with, I mean, just if people don't know, these are phenomenal albums. You have On Fire. Then you have Petra Praise was next, right?
Petra Praise was next.
And then you had Beyond Belief, which... And then of course you had, what was after that? Wake Up Call?
No Doubt.
No Doubt. No, I think
Wake Up Call.
Wake Up Call.
I'll let you.
Those
you got called out.
I got called out.
Those 4 albums.
They're really strong.
Are so amazing. So I've got a lot of questions about that time. But number one, what was it like coming into a situation? Because John and Dina were already producers, right?
Yeah.
I mean, did you just kind of just jump right in and just do whatever they said, or how creative were you a part of the process? Because you are an amazing bass player. I love your sound, and I even when I was a teenager and I was playing bass, I loved watching you play the bass because I was like, I love the sound. I love what he's doing.
Very kind.
So, so what was it like? Let's just start with that. John and Dina. What was that like?
Well, it was. I didn't have any studio experience, so but, real studio experience. It took a few years for me to find out what my personality was on the bass guitar. It just takes time. You have to find your voice. So the first record that I had, pretty much Petra Praise. That was an entry into a lot of that. Okay. You
finding your voice.
Yes. Yeah. In a very small way. And then Beyond Belief was like, okay, I have my voice. So, man, how do you describe it? It's finding your voice in this musical environment. When we were doing Beyond Belief, John and Dino Elefante had 2 studios next door to one another in Los Alamitos, California, outside of Los Angeles. And that's where they were originally from. So the way Beyond Belief happened is that Bob had written a bunch of songs. I guess Lowry had 2. Then Bob would go early to Los Angeles and work with John and Dino, and they would work out arrangements and parts and pieces and stuff. And then they would kind of formulate a game plan on how this song needs to sound. And then they would, FedEx me a cassette tape in those days of, here's the blueprint with some fake drums, a little bit of Bob guitar, all this other fake imaginary stuff. And by the time I would get to California to do it, I showed up when Louie did. Now keep in mind they have 2 studios, so I would be working with Dino, recording bass, playing to drums that Louis had just done the day before with John Elefante in the other studio.
Wow.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time any of us had heard really it completed and done was after literally it was done.
Wow.
Makes sense? Because of the distance, you weren't just going to go pop by and hear Schlitt doing some vocals.
Right.
That wasn't practical, especially in those days. So it was an exciting time, and I can tell you from the word go, when we all started working on it, it was like something special.
Beyond Belief?
Yes,
specifically.
Beyond Belief.
I was going to ask that.
special.
Like, did it feel, because so I love On Fire,
I get it.
and
Loved
I love Wake Up Call.
it. Yeah.
I think Wake Up Call is underappreciated, in my opinion. I think it's a phenomenal album. But because music was changing around that time, I think maybe it didn't get some of the attention it could have. But I think Beyond Belief was one of those just lightning in a bottle albums. And I think Petra Praise, like we've talked about this, changed praise music. So you work at a mega church now. I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way.
No, I get it.
But you work at a very large church where, like, we are in this age of the rock stars are worship leaders now.
Yeah.
And I think you guys kicked that off with Petra Praise. I don't know if you feel that.
Well, from being around, that's very kind. Very kind. Thank you. When I can remember having the first discussions with Bob and John Lowry and all of us, literally, I remember standing on stage at a sound check and Bob going, I've got this idea. We're going to do a worship record. We're like, what is that? Okay, so here's how this came to play. In our concerts, toward the end of the night, we would always have like a 20-minute kind of section that we called the praise medley. And it was always, we did songs where we talked about Jesus, right? And they were relationship songs between you and the Lord. Some of them were also picturesque. They were stories. And then now we're going to shift to a thing where we are all singing to Jesus, right? We are worshiping him, calling out his attributes and saying who he is.
Right.
So for 20 minutes, there would be all these different pieces of songs that we would put together that people would never associate with a rock band. That would have been churchy songs, right? Well, people really liked that part of the concert. They loved it. And so I guess the idea was born from going, well, we're getting, in the actual story was, we were getting lots of questions from youth pastors going, okay, we want to do modern Christian music in our church and worship for our student events, but we have nothing. We don't have any musicians, right? So the original concept was, we do this record of these songs, and we're going to do it in the Petra kind of vein of music, and it's going to be a quote-unquote worship record, which nobody knew what it was at the time because nobody had ever done it, at least not stylistic like this. The original product, you would buy the CD with vocals or without vocals, right? So you could buy the version that's got the full band doing it, or you can buy it without the lead vocals. And so that if you're a youth pastor, your small group, your student group has 50 people in it, yours has 10, you probably don't have musicians in your group, or you don't have many. Right. So you can put on the CD you want to, make a playlist, and there's your worship night. And it came with a songbook. Wow. And then that took off and went well. And then we realized that we needed to do it in Spanish. So there's a version of it in Spanish.
Yeah, it's on Apple. It's on Apple.
Okay.
I saw that,
Where a translator vocal coach coached John Schlitt through every word, every phrase.
Did he make fun of him the whole time like you guys?
Oh, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we never let it down. So, okay, in the midst of this, we had just started a new record contract with a new record company. And our first record, we wanted to do this oddball thing that nobody had ever done before.
Brilliant.
We had no idea. We were just being obedient. It wasn't some part of some magical marketing plan. If it was, nobody would have chosen this.
This is God's marketing
It was
plan.
a So we did the thing, and then we just started touring as normal. And then all of a sudden, people wanted to hear these songs. So we had to learn how to play all these songs together. And we would do them. And then that went to the next year and a half of our life that, okay, we're playing songs from Petra Praise.
Yeah.
And it was just
Well,
a
Beyond
different
Belief
kind of
came
thing.
out right after.
Right after.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a strange time in that audiences were growing. They were wanting to hear, definitely a lot of this Petra Praise record, which is fine. We thought it was a specialty record that we would do and probably not have to play a lot. But we ended up playing it a lot.
Well, here's my take on it, and why I think it really worked. Is my experience was, as someone in those youth groups,
Sure.
I went to Christian concerts to praise God with music I liked.
Come on now.
I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
And I loved my church. I loved my pastors.
Absolutely.
But they played old hymns, and they played them in a very sort of country style. And God, again, when I was around 19 or 20, God worked on my heart. He was like,
Understood.
He was like, just because it's not a music you don't like, just because it's not a music you like, you should look at the words. Like, look what you're saying.
It's supposed to be singing to me anyway.
Yeah,
Okay?
you should. And so I learned to. So now some of those songs, like I'd rather have Jesus and Victory in Jesus,
gosh.
like some of those
Classic.
old hymns are some of my favorite songs
Yes.
because God had to work on my heart. But for a while there, I was going to Petra, Whiteheart, the Garmo Key. I was going to these concerts because I felt I was praising God. And maybe that's immature, but that's how I felt. So for you guys to put that out, we were like, thank you, Jesus. like something that spoke our musical language.
Certainly.
And, and I still play, I probably still play Take Me In to the Holy of Holies. I still I can't sing that high, but I play it in my key.
Sure.
I probably still play it
That's great.
when I do worship and stuff. So, such a phenomenal album.
And from the radio standpoint, because that's kind of how I process a lot of those
Certainly.
albums, is like how I experienced them through that. I remember just the concept of doing that, and for me, I looked at it as, I didn't really look at it as a specialty record. Look, Petra's got a new album out.
Yeah, me too.
Because I was so into basically everything. My first 2 cassettes tapes I got were Steve Taylor, I Want to Be a Clone.
Oh, yes.
And Petra, Never Say Die.
Oh,
Those
classics.
are the first 2 cassettes I ever received with my fresh new boombox in
Yes.
1983.
Yeah.
Did you hold it up?
I did.
you hold it up at the park?
I did.
I'm kidding.
I did.
Yeah.
That's how I got my wife.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. No, but so like I was fully into Petra from the jump. So I was big into This Means War. I was big into On Fire.
Sure.
So for me, it was just like, Petra's got a new album coming out.
Sure.
But then the concept was just really strange because it was strange, but it wasn't strange. It was comfortable and it felt right. But then from a radio programming standpoint, it's just like, we got some fresh Petra music to play. So I Love the Lord was a rock song.
yeah.
And,
Great song.
and all of these, it was just another album really for us.
Yeah.
Good.
It was just more Petra to play because
Good.
at that time we couldn't get enough. I mean, it was.
Yes.
Well, working in the church world now, do you feel what I'm saying, that album at least had some impact on sort of the growing? I mean, I think Vineyard music was a part of that too, but that sort of growing worship industry.
As I look back on it, I don't know that I've ever said this or talked about this in an interview. Looking back at that time, Vineyard was around.
Right.
I don't even know. I think it was probably still 5 or 10 years before Darlene Check, before any of her things got popular. I don't know that to be true, but there wasn't much. I remember a friend of mine named Chris had worked for, maybe it was Maranatha. Okay, so there was some stuff.
It was like Hosanna music. It was one.
Yes.
Integrity.
But literally not. Thank you. It was Integrity Music that Chris worked for. Okay, but there was literally nothing rock. There was nothing pop rock.
Right.
There was nothing pop.
Right.
With some of those musical sensibilities, right? There literally was nothing. So I'm the audio director for a church with 9 campuses and a lot of people. And what we do is edgy. It's loud guitars. I like loud drums. It's just a thing, right? It's all worship. It's all praise. It's all the songs everybody knows, right? So I don't think on a normal basis that it is. There is not a time when I sit and think, 12 Stone is doing this because Petra did Petra Praise.
Right.
I'm not thinking that.
Right.
But I'm also aware of the fact of how a genre was started because some of us took a leap of faith and did something we felt like needed to happen. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And eventually worship kind of stuff took on its own roots, and it, now I'm at the point where, I come from a Christian rock band from the 80s and 90s where there was lots of variation on the music you could listen to.
Right.
Right? Now, there are points in time when I want to shake the whole industry and go, we do not all need to sound the same.
Praise God.
Right? This doesn't need to happen. This homogenous thing, I know you're trying to make music that people in churches can play.
Right.
I get that. You want to make it simple. You should also be making music that people should have to work to play because you want their musicianship to get better.
Right.
That's how it started. Is that if you wanted to be in a local Christian band and do a DeGarmo and Key song, you had to learn how to play what Dana Key played. That's not easy.
No.
Okay. So I feel the push and the pull and the tug in a healthy way.
Yeah.
But I'm also the person that I don't say very often, but my heart is that there should be so much really interesting praise and worship music.
Agreed.
There should be. And I'm not saying there's not, but
it's harder to find.
It's harder to find.
And just recently, I forget the name of the band, but I saved it and since we don't have service, but it's like a really heavy metal, modern heavy metal.
Is it?
Well, Sleeping Giant is one that I love, but they're not really together anymore. But this is a new band, and it's like it's this beautiful. I think the lyrics are beautiful about finding Jesus in the secret place, and it's a beautiful song. But it's like really like and I'm like, this is me.
It works. Okay. Yeah.
But,
Get it.
I'm with you.
So I would love to see a bigger variety in that. However,
Well, we could go down a rabbit hole, but I think it's because that is where the industry has been pushed. I think, and a lot of it goes to who now owns the record labels and what sells and what's playing on the radio.
It's
and
a whole bunch of stuff.
It's a big corporate.
It's pop music too.
Yeah.
It's the same with pop music. To find anything interesting, you have to go indie somewhere. I mean, and so there's pros and cons to all that. So how did you get how did you transition from Petra to kind of where you are now? I know that's like 20 years. So maybe there's a lot of stories in there, but so you were with Petra through No Doubt, right?
Yes.
And which was like the mid 90s. And so what was your transition out of Petra into other stuff?
Okay. Well, by that point, by about 96, I was now writing 2 or 3 songs for each Petra record. It was just kind of something that happened, I was more comfortable in the studio environment, right? So I enjoyed it. I soaked all that information up just like a sponge. How is it engineered? How's it made? How's it produced? What does this do? So I managed to, after I left Petra, I knew that God had something else in store for me to do. And so going back on coming into Petra, which is, okay, God, you got to show me. I ended up managing a recording studio in Florida. And that was a very interesting time. I eventually owned a studio, but, okay, keep in mind, Florida at that point in time was a hotbed, late 90s, of pop music and rock music. Mm-hmm. You know, Matchbox 20. They were also hosts of boy bands.
Oh, yeah.
You know, from all that. So Florida was a very strong music market. And I thought I would just end up producing, certainly I'll end up producing some Christian records. That's what I wanted to do. Take what I had learned, pass that along to someone else. Well, I couldn't get any kind of mainstream major label Christian record gig to save my life. But I was doing records for other people that were selling tremendously. So it was a strange dichotomy of I have this as a background. God is not opening those doors yet. I just did a record for somebody that just sold 100,000 copies. Okay. And then this one was with the band. God was very kind. I had a lot of really interesting life experiences working with a lot of really good bands. And so I just stayed in that environment for a long time. There was a point in time where, by this point, music was being recorded on a computer and not tape machines anymore. We call it, there's a brand is Pro Tools. Oh, yeah. Okay, so I adopted to that in 97. And by a certain time in early 2000s, I was doing well with that. That was one of my fortes. And so I got a call from an engineer to be his Pro Tools operator for some recording sessions he was doing. I had known about this man, this engineer / producer, because he had done all the Michael Jackson records, like all of them, like all the big ones, right? Wow. Okay, and he had done just his legacy of recordings and productions would have been the best of the best from when R&B and pop was started. So he was already 70 or so at the time. Wow. He and his wife now lived outside this little small town in Florida. And so I would go and operate his Pro Tools rig and work for him. And he, it was a delightful thing. But now I'm in the presence of there was no way to argue he was the highest selling record producer / engineer at that point in time, and was the most delightful man I've ever met in my life. And he and his wife lived there. They had 2 dogs. One of them was named Boo Boo. His wife would cook dinner for us every night. We worked till we were working in his studio and go to his house on the property, and she would have made chicken and all this. And it was just the most normal, amazing thing. But out of that, I gained a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, soaking up information from him. It's like, how'd you do Thriller? The Michael Jackson record. So,
I mean, do you not want to say the name, who it was? It's not. It wasn't Quincy, was it?
No, it wasn't Quincy. Okay. But it was.
I was like, are you talking about Quincy Jones?
No, it wasn't Quincy. His name was Bruce Wedeen.
Okay, all right.
So all of the records that Quincy did,
he was the
Quincy's
engineer.
right-hand man was Bruce.
Oh, gotcha.
And so We Are the World, all that kind of anything that you watch, you're going to see Bruce recording it, or as well as Barbra Streisand and all these other people. Yeah. So anyway, I learned a lot from him. And anyway, I'm just following away information. God, what do you want to do with me? What do you want to do? Well, after about that kind of period of my life, I moved back to Shreveport, Louisiana, where I grew up. My dad had Parkinson's disease, and I wanted to be able to spend as much time with him as I could. Mm-hmm. So I moved back to Shreveport, Louisiana. God, here I am. What do you want to do with me? I kind of like to be like a technical director at a church. I think that would be a good fit. I got to have a job. I got to work. Mm-hmm. So ended up, as God does these things, Ronnie, here's an opportunity. So I ended up working on staff for the church that I grew up in. Did that. Was at that church for 12 years as a technical director, audio, video, just a bunch of different things. And then through Lee Baker, I found out that 12 Stone was needing an audio director here. Now, by this point, I knew that God was changing seasons of my life again. There's a stirring that I feel. It's not based on, oh, I'm not happy at my job. That's a very shallow way of looking at it. That's not it at all. But it's when God moves, and I prepared myself, my wife, we prayed a lot, and interviewed here. And after a period of time, we picked up and moved here, and it's just been an amazing thing. I just love it. I'm fortunate to get to do what I love to do. We have a recording studio here. You know, we have beautiful PA systems and the best mixing consoles you can buy, and I just love it. And the people are awesome.
And there's a lot of talent in this church, too.
There's a lot of talent in this church. Yes. That was a very long-winded answer. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's good.
It was a very good answer. You did a great job.
That was the answer we were looking for. That's good.
But, you know, coming here, 12 Stone very much wanted and welcomed all the wisdom and information I could bring to the table. Right. So I'm hired as an audio director, and they want all that other knowledge as well. Right. A lot of life experiences. So I'm thrilled that that's valued, and I get to use those skills and love it.
And not that you walk around wearing like Petra concert gear or whatever, but I've found that like my kids have no clue who any of this stuff is. And the people I work at a ministry, and by and large, there's like this many of us that actually listened to this back in the day or who know any of it. It's like around here, do people really grasp like what your experiences really have been, or is it one of those things where I know Lee does, but are there other people that are like going, wait, you were in Petra, or like understand the gravity of some of that? Not that you're like big time them, but it's kind of like you've got these really amazing experiences in this Christian world.
Well, as God does things, one of the people I interviewed with was Seth White, who is the main worship leader here at the Lawrenceville campus. And he and I are talking, and, you know, I did 12 interviews.
Wow.
You know, we're very thorough.
It's because it's 12 Stones?
Yeah, there you go.
You have to do like the Issachar, it's like the Issachar, you know, interview. And like,
get it.
Oh, no, our disciples, like the barn, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. Some people have had more interviews than the 12. It's just not uncommon. We're very thorough, right?
Right, yeah.
So anyway, I'm talking to Seth, and he looks at me and he goes, it just dawned on me who you are. I said, yeah, I'm Ronny Cates. He said, did you play in Petra? And I said, yes. He said, you guys were the first concert I ever went to.
Wow.
And that was in Atlanta at the theater. What is the thing?
Fox Theater?
Fox Theater.
Oh, might have been the Fox. But there was another theater there was another theater downtown that you guys played at.
Really?
I'm trying to remember what it was, but yes.
Okay. So there's that with Seth. We don't talk, we joke about it every now and then now. Our director of marketing here, his name is Pierre. He and his delightful wife and their family are originally from Germany. Mm. The very first concert he ever went to was a Petra concert in Germany, and I was there.
Wow.
So, yeah, we have some unique relationships here that who would have ever thought all those years ago that there would be some sort of connection. But there are those here.
Yeah, 'cause I remember one time I was working when I first started working at In Touch, which was 2011, I think. I was sitting in my office. I was listening to Holy Soldier.
Yeah.
And one of my coworkers walked in and goes, is that Holy Soldier? I'm like, you're my people.
That's sure.
It was one of those kind of moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just got to find those connections. But that's really cool. And at some point, you know, it's like, you know, you just become Ronnie.
Yeah.
And that's where it should be.
That's where it is. They all know, and they joke about it.
Yeah.
You know, we have a healthy joke about it, you know, but yeah, they know me as Ronnie.
Yeah, that's really cool. Like I was pleasantly surprised when I found you were on staff, because I was like, I'm going to get them one day and we're going to talk. Funny story though.
Yeah.
And I may have the details slightly wrong,
okay.
But right after you joined Petra, you guys played at Atlanta Fest.
Yeah.
And I remember I was standing right beside or behind either it was really good friends of yours or family members of yours. I think it was family.
Okay.
I just remember like you were new and we're like,
Yes.
oh, that's the new bass player. And then like, it was like, that's Ronnie, that's my brother, or my sister,
Yeah,
sure. Not your sister, but you know what I'm saying? I can't remember exactly. Like the details are very foggy, but I still remember to this day. It's like,
man, was that in the middle of the raceway?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my very first concert I played with Petra.
That's what I thought. I didn't want to say that because I was like, I thought it was your first. But
that was it.
You get foggy. You know, it's like maybe it's the second or third. But.
Yeah, that was it. And those were a bunch of friends that had driven over from Nashville, where I was living at the time. And yeah, that was all right. This feels normal. You know, a very strange kind of thing. Yeah, it's a very exciting night.
Oh yeah. That was fun.
Wow. So I have yet another person that I've met that, you know, you were there for the first time I played. So,
I was at that one too.
Were you really?
Oh yeah.
Goodness gracious.
He and I were at a lot of concerts together, and we did not know each other. Like it's 20 years later, we're like, wait, you were there too?
Yeah,
oh no, I was there.
Yeah, it's funny, but I was at the same, not podcast fodder necessarily, but I was at the same Creed concert as my wife before we met. Like right before we met, and I was like, we could have like passed each other in the hall.
Yeah,
that's my wife.
And you started singing, "With arms wide open." Well, you started going, just go for it. Okay, so just as we close, what's next for you? Like, I mean, like you love it here. This is you feel like this is your wheelhouse now. But you know, what are you up to otherwise?
Wow. That's a great question. I would only be speculating at this point. I'll tell you that. I love this church and being involved with it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love what I get to speak into. I love the people I work with. They are amazing people. You know, I also get to have fun doing stuff that's outside of 12 Stone. Like I mix records for people. Does that make sense? You know, they record their record. I'm mixing one for Lee Baker right now. Oh, yeah. You know? I do that some throughout the year. Sometimes people send me tracks to play bass on. That's fine. And last weekend, my wife and I put together a gazebo and put it in our backyard, and that's just as much fun as all the rest of it is. Yeah. You know, so what is next? That's totally in God's hands, and He is so faithful. And although some of the changes in my life have been difficult and, you know, transitions are not generally easy, right? They're exciting. There are a number of things, but it takes your body and your mind and everything a little bit of time to adjust. God has been very graceful. So I just don't know. But I know this. I love where He has me right now.
So cool.
I love it. Yeah. And there's a possibility I'll see some of the Petra guys maybe next month. Not sure.
Oh, okay. So
not sure.
Well, that leads me to another question. There's a lot of Petra activity for the 50th anniversary and just all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah. Has there been any? Have you been involved in any of that stuff? Like, or they say, "Hey, Ronnie, you want to go on tour?" Because they're doing a lot of touring.
There's a lot of plan. We have not had those conversations. I mean, I do have conversations with them. It's been a few years now. However, the band that Hartman and Schlett and some others are with, that part of Petra, they have all played together for years and years and years and years. So it's just an ideal thing for them to do. I think everybody ought to go see them. Yeah. I really do. You've got to go see Bob Hartman play live. You've got to hear it. He was always amazing. He rarely messed up, like rarely messed up. He's just delightful to watch play.
Well, and he's one of those that was always good, wrote amazing songs.
Yes.
Never flashy, never about himself. No. And it showed from the stage, but he would just get up there and just shred for 2 hours, and then you'd be like, wow, that guy.
We used to make jokes when we would go see Petra. Yeah. We're like, it's like my dad's accountant is up on stage shredding.
Like that's what it was like.
Because he was just like he just kind of
it's effortless.
And then live because I was, into more like the metal stuff,
Sure.
But live, he'd start playing stuff and you're like, wow.
It's amazing.
Like really, really. Sometimes you didn't catch it on the record how amazing it was, but then you're watching him live and him just, it's not like he's, grunting doing it. Like, he's just, he's just, la, 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 just doing this amazing. He's a great guitar player.
That's him. But they're playing a lot, happy for him, super excited for him. There have been discussions on and off for years about some sort of maybe Petra movie or some kind of
Beyond
something.
Belief. Yeah, they're talking about it now.
Yeah.
That is one that I'm aware that has been discussed.
Yeah.
The other one was a little bit different scenario. But along with those things, that world, the movie industry is, you can talk about doing something for 5 years and it may never happen, or it might happen tomorrow.
He knows.
Yeah.
You get it. So I'm going to record some video and audio clips for some sort of Petra thing that I understand will be on a network.
Awesome.
But I'm not sure of the scope of it. I've heard discussions, but I'd love to play with them one time.
Yeah.
To do a few songs with them again. We did something together probably 7 or 8 years ago. You can catch it on YouTube. It was for,
It's not building a gazebo.
It's not building a gazebo.
Okay, all right.
Bob came over and helped.
And man, from the moment, so I get there and we rehearse. We did I'm on the Rock. Was that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we played, asking you. And we show up at John Lowry's house, who is just outside of Nashville. And we all get together and we just start playing. It was exactly the same.
Really?
Feeling
So cool.
and everything as it was 20 years. Like, literally, I joked about this earlier. We laughed at the same things. We did the same thing. John also forgot lyrics again, just like he always did. I mean, it was exactly
was
the same.
Louis on drums or was somebody?
Louis was on drums,
got
and
it.
he and I laughed about the same things we all do. And it was just delightful.
That is so cool.
And when we played, I think we all realized, there's something to these 5 people playing together. There's something, right? That's not in. It's the right pieces of the recipe, I guess. I don't know, but it was something.
Yeah. I believe it. You guys are amazing live, man. I mean, I
very kind.
I never missed it. I mean, if you guys were in town or you were at a festival, I was not going to miss it.
So cool.
Well, it was an amazing opportunity. Yeah. But
God has a way of putting us in situations like that sometimes that we, like, how did I get here?
Yeah. We were all a part of situations or have been in our lives that are much bigger than ourselves.
For sure.
Right?
Well,
We're just a part of the team that did it.
Right.
That God had blessed and assembled the team and called us to do this thing. We've all been there.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a friend of mine, Alan Arnold, who's he works with John Eldridge now, but he says you got a choice: story 1 or story 2. Story 1 is a story everybody lives. It's a story that makes sense. It's a story of predictability. It's a story of, or there's story 2, which is mystery, and you don't know how it's going to happen. You don't know what's going. Like
choose your own ending.
Story 2 is God's story. Like but it all reflects back from your testimony today, your story today. It reflects back on, I didn't do this. It reflects back on someone else is in charge, and that's a beautiful thing.
Thank God for that.
Well, Ronnie, thank you first of all for your gifts that you've shared with us over the years, because
Thank you.
I mean, we've said it here today. It's like Petra has been such a big part of our lives, and I know a lot of our listeners' lives, and you were a massive part of that. And thank you for letting us, invade your workspace for a little bit, and actually getting to record in a real studio for once. I mean, it's like I told Britt coming in, this is going to be the best sounding episode of our podcast ever.
That's great.
But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for what you do at my church, because I get to reap the benefits of a lot of that. So thanks everybody for watching and listening. We will be back with probably a familiar sounding album soon. episode because we'll probably wind up.
There might be a familiar bass player on
Yeah,
there.
we'll be very critical of the bass lines. In the album.
It's okay. It's fine.
No, we're usually pretty nice. Sometimes we're not.
Sometimes.
But yeah. So thanks everybody for listening. Share. Let us know in the comments below if you've got any questions for Ronnie, and I'll make sure that I get them over to him, and then he can.
Yep.
You can answer them.
Like how to build a gazebo. I'm just going to keep going back to the gazebo.
Yes. Yeah. If you have any questions about building gazebos,
That's right.
Gazebo Talk podcast is coming out next.
It's coming up next.
All right. Well, thanks again, Ronnie, and we
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. And thank
You're
you guys
very
for tuning in.
All right.
God bless.